their everyday life. So it is very much about, I would say, expanding our story over the next years and to a much more international audience. So we're, of course, very well recognized in Denmark, recognized in a few key markets, but there's a lot of markets where we see huge potential for growth, both for the brand and for the product.
Interesting, very interesting. And now let me just ask you one last question that's a little bit more personal rather than business. And did you have any unexpected insights while you were in lockdown in Denmark and separated from your family in Italy? So anything good come out of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's I'm still separated from my family. I actually haven't seen my husband for about 3.5 months now. Not physically seen him. Of course, I've seen him on Skype, and the same for my children. And my children were actually, I have adult children, but they were living in Milan. And they were able to move to our family home, which is in the south of Italy before the lockdown. But for sure, the experience between Italy and Denmark was very different. Italy lived a very dramatic situation. Milan, where my boys were living, was hit very hard, very, very early on. It was the first place in Europe to have the first cases, and also when so little was known about the virus. And so there was a lot of, well, we continue living, it's a flu, we'll get over it. And the lockdown happened much later than it should have, because simply there was no knowledge. And then there was a dramatic lockdown to people not being able to leave their houses at all. My mother, who is 80 years old, didn't step foot out of her house for 2 months, was not able to see her grandchildren. Nobody was able to visit her. Luckily, we have her on Skype, and she knows how to use WhatsApp and video calls. But it's really hard knowing that she was by herself. She's a widow, not able to leave the house, not being able to interact, not being able to do any of her routine daily activities. I think for the younger generations, one of my sons was studying online, the other one working online. Very little changed for them. But for my husband and myself, I think it's been extremely tough, because we have such hectic lives, but we always make space for one another. And even though he lives in Italy and I live in Denmark, it's, one weekend me flying over and one weekend him flying over, and very often, making those long weekends. And so suddenly that disappears, and you tend to throw yourself, well, at least I threw myself in my work, and that also kept me a little bit sane in this time. But for sure, I think the positive side of things is that you can get through it, excuse me. I think, throwing yourself in despair is not an approach that I would take. As I said, I'm generally optimistic. I'm optimistic about the climate. I'm also optimistic about life. And I think having that end view that we're going to get over this is the positive side of things. That both as a company, as a person, humanity, it is a big bump that nobody expected. So many people, so many lives lost, and it's been incredibly dramatic. And we have to rebuild. Then let's at least rebuild in a better way.
Well, I don't think you could sum it up any better, and I think you've given inspiration to a lot of us, both personally and professionally. So I hope that you will come back to the show, particularly as you expand internationally, because I'm sure you're going to have some interesting stories to tell. And we thank you and wish you well as you reconnect with your husband. Okay.
The objective is next weekend. So.
Excellent. Good for you. All right. Well, thank you so much, Mirella.
Thank you so much, Deborah. Thank you.
Thanks, Mirella, for being part of today's show and for playing an essential role in advocating marketing's role in the purpose-driven organization. You've inspired us all to think more deeply about the evolution of purpose in light of current world events. Now back to Rick.
And thanks for joining us for another Internationalist Trendsetter show hosted by Deborah Malone. To get further information on today's topic, visit the-internationalist.com. unforeseeninternationalist.com, your trusted source for innovative marketing trends, best practices, aspiring to create new world standards. Have a great week. This show is brought to you by Success Made to Last. Success Made to Last is a multimedia company with a focus on you and releasing your full potential. If you want to find out more information about all the programs associated with this company, go to successmadetolast.com.